Cares is the intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This Casey's Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing, Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Horses are magnificent animals, often large and statuesque. Horses often evoke power and strength and freedom. They also possess an ability to connect with humans and help them heal from trauma. That's the focus of Horses and Heroes, a Kansas City nonprofit established in 2014 to offer trauma recovery with equine assisted and alternative therapies for veterans, active members of the military, their families, first responders, and their children. And it's free. So how does this all work? Well, joining us today is Horses and Hero founder, Julie Baker, and she's going to tell us all about this really interesting and incredible nonprofit. Julie, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Ruth, and thank you for having us on today. So, quick little history of Horses and Heroes. I started rescuing horses when I was 12. Quickly discovered that, their trauma is similar to our trauma. They heal in very different ways. And so that was one of the kind of what laid the foundation for Horses and Heroes. And we're a military family. So the two entities kind of came together. So all of the horses on our team are rescued. And yes, we serve the military population and their families at no cost. Thank you for all the donors that help make that possible.
You were 7 years old and you were rescuing horses?
12.
I'm sorry.
I was in sixth grade.
Oh well, my gosh.
It was kind of I had a horse I was showing at that point, but then my mom kind of announced, hey, we found this horse. He was in a dry lot. We were in California at the time. He didn't have any water. And I don't know the details of how they acquired him, but they acquired him and announced that he was my horse. And so the first time I met him, I couldn't get closer than 5 feet. He would start to sweat and tremble and he was terrified of people. You could see visible scars on his back legs where somebody had physically beaten on him. And so, being a naive 12-year-old, I just thought, well, maybe if I just let him get used to me and, take my time, go real slow, he'll learn to trust me. And that's basically what happened. And so that laid, like I said, a foundation of what we do today.
All right. So from a 12-year-old who loved a horse and was still yet a little afraid, it sounds like both of you were afraid of each other in the beginning, way back then. You obviously got over that fear. Bring us up to what led to you creating this nonprofit in 2014.
Well, a lot of life experiences. I was wife of a Marine Corps veteran. So we lived active duty lifestyle for 14 years, had 3 little kids while we were moving from base to base. And, I loved the Marine Corps, but they thought, well, 6 months is probably a good time to move a family across, from East Coast to West Coast, North and South. And so that was our lifestyle. And really, it wasn't until we got to Kansas City that I experienced my first, what I call transitional phase of being a military, spouse and then coming into the civilian world. I mean, I had a conversation with another military spouse yesterday, and there is this transitional struggle, because you're used to the camaraderie, you're used to the support, everybody speaks the same lingo. And you make really quick friends, and when you're living on base, when you live off base or when you move into the civilian world, oftentimes that reality is really different depending on where you move, obviously. But we discovered that, the neighbors just weren't outside. We were the youngest family on the block. So there just wasn't that instant connection. And so you really do feel a loss. You do feel that, gosh, where's my mission? Where's my purpose? Where's my support system? And so, unfortunately, that's got a very prevalent struggle for active duty people when they transition. They think that they can come home and have this wonderful life and get a great job. And the reality is it doesn't happen like that in most cases. And so it leads to a lot of depression and anxiety and, abuse of alcohol and drugs. And unfortunately, that's the highest population of death by suicide. And so, to wrap around to your question, when I was back in 2013, I was working a corporate job, and I knew just in my heart that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I had all the bells and whistles in the car and the expense accounts. I'm like, this just is not this is not where my heart is. What is it? And so I kept going back to that memory of rescuing that first horse and that rehabilitation and, the trust and the bond that happens, once that rehabilitation has happened. And so I thought, gosh, it would be really great if I could bring the rescued horses and utilize their healing stories with the veteran population, because we had gotten out of the service at that point, and my two oldest daughters served 5 years in the Marine Corps together, and they were out now too. And so we were watching a lot of their family and friends struggle, that same struggle that I had experienced. And so I thought, well, it would be great to do that. And I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know where to start or even how to begin. And so I was taking a lot of long walks and going on jogs and just trying to figure this out in my head. What would this look like and how would I start? And then one day I was sitting on my couch and I just had this very strong nudge to go Google it. And I was like, Google what? I don't even know what to Google. And so I typed in equine therapy, and up popped this association called EGALA. They're the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association. They're a global entity. And much to my surprise, I discovered that they do this, and they had a program for military. And so really on the spot, and it was a very kind of a surreal experience, but that vague idea of what is it and what would it look like went to instant clarity. And I knew the name. I knew all of the steps of, okay, I have to set up the corporation. It needs to be a 501c3. We're going to serve a veteran population. So I'm writing this list of everything, went ahead and filed for the corporate name and got that secured. And so that's how Horses and Heroes started. It was just that culmination of those two things that were very personal and special to me, that saving those rescued horses and helping people transitioning that are struggling. And so that's how it started. And here we are today.
Talk about a leap of faith.
It was tough. I have to laugh, but it was also very scary. And my business coach at the time, when all of this was happening, she kept asking me, why are you doing what you're doing? And I'm like, oh, no, because I can. I was very lukewarm about it, like I said. And she said, well, when you find your why, two things are going to happen. It's going to scare the you-know-what out of you, and it'll probably make you cry. And so, I'm like, great, let's bring it on. It sounds like a great time. And so I kid you not, when I found the EGALA Association on the computer that day, and I noticed that they had a military program, I just started weeping. It was just uncontrollable weeping. And I was terrified. My husband, as a pilot, was gone. So he was on a trip, and he came home that Sunday and he said, what'd you do this weekend? I said, well, I started a nonprofit called Horses and Heroes. And he said, what? I said, well, trust me, it's terrifying. I don't really know everything I need to know. Obviously, people are going to show up and we'll figure it out. But it was scary. And, we do have scary moments, but it's very worth it.
Well, given our audience, I would love for you to share how you got from the scary and emotional moment to actually then creating an organization. You mentioned this national organization that's focused on the therapy aspect, but how did you move things forward in terms of structure, in terms of your programming, et cetera?
Well, I did have a framework in mind. Like I said, I wanted it to be a nonprofit so we could get funding to help support it, because I realized that, being a military person, if your insurance doesn't cover it, you probably can't afford it. And so that was one of the key elements. I knew it had to be funding coming from outside to help military families, because military families struggle. They don't make a lot of money. And so, just knowing in the back of my mind that these elements have to be in place. It has to be accessible. It has to be affordable. It has to be confidential, because if those elements aren't in place, then somebody probably will not have the trust to come. And in spite of being scared, you just have to make a plan, and you just have to stick to it, and I guess all of my corporate training and sales training, you can't fold or shrink away from those challenges. You have to just go ahead and do them, even though they're scary. And I still have mornings where I wake up and I'm like, oh, what the heck, but again, you just have to continue to push forward. So, how this all transpired is, like I said, I've set up the corporate entity, got all the requirements and filings in place for the state. And then went through the process of doing the 501c3 application, which, it was long, but it wasn't horrible. Then I took myself to training. And so the EGALA Association offers trainings throughout the world. And so I identified the first training, which was in Nevada, I believe the first one was. And so I bought a ticket to Nevada and signed up for the training and got the certification required to be the equine specialist. And so in all of our sessions, we approach it from a team approach. So there's always a licensed clinician and a certified equine specialist, and then the team of horses. And so, again, I just had this list of things I know had to be done, to make it work. And the rest of it, like I said, people showed up, one of the stories that we like to share, how I met our lead clinician, Rachel. I had a client at that time, and she was a psychologist, and I was sharing with her, I just started this nonprofit and I was excited, but I don't know any clinicians in town. Who would I reach out to, that would be interested in working with us? And so she gave me a list of about 5 people. And I knew kind of instinctually it wasn't time yet, because I was still going through that certification training, still had some, the 501c3 things to finish. And so I kind of stuck that paper in my notebook. And then one day, again, I had a very strong nudge to get paper out. And so I'm looking at this paper, and there's 5 names on them. They don't mean anything to me. I didn't know one from the other. I literally went beep, bink, and put my finger on a name. And I'm typing this email, introducing myself. Here's what we're doing. If you're interested, great. If you're not, would you please forward this information to somebody who is? And so I hit send the button. And so later on that afternoon, I get this call from the woman I sent the email from. And she's like, you are not going to believe what just happened. It's like, what do you mean? She goes, well, this morning I'm meeting with my professional advisor. And he's asking me what my 5-year plan is for my practice. She just graduated from, getting all of her licensures finished. And she was saying that she wanted to work with somebody to do equine therapy, but she didn't know who in town was doing equine therapy. And the advisor says, well, just put it out there and then, something will connect. And they leave their coffee meeting. And I'm not kidding you. The minute she walks out the door into the parking lot is when she received my email. And she just about fainted, because they just had this conversation about how she wanted to connect with somebody to be a clinician for equine therapy. And in comes my email inviting her to be our clinician. And so, literally things have happened like that throughout the 8 years, where people just show up and there's no explaining it. And I don't ask questions. I just give a lot of, gestures of gratitude. And that's really how all of the structure came to be, is we just identified the elements. We worked through the fears that tried to hold us back, and we just kept moving forward.
Now, through this training that you took, did they have a structured program that you could kind of model after? Or were you kind of creating really your own kind of curriculum?
We had to create our own. There's really, they do and they don't. the licensed clinicians go through their training, already are state licensed. And then the equine specialists have to have 6,000 hours of equine experience. And beyond that, they don't have a lot of like models to share for your business structure, because it's, like I said, it's used all over the world, and inpatient, outpatient, food addiction, sex addiction, human trafficking, you name it. It's the equine therapy piece is used all over the world. And so it looks a little bit different, but they do have a structure of their mode of therapy, that it's a team approach, it's solution focused. The clients have all of their own answers, and we follow a code of ethics. Other than that, especially here in Kansas City, there was really nothing to model from. And so we literally, we're plowing a path through the woods. Some of it was easy, some of it wasn't easy, but in terms of a nonprofit business structure, I mean, we have to function as a business. We have to make business decisions like every other business needs to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't survive. But being a nonprofit, it's a challenge in that we, we're constantly having to find funding. Offering these sessions to our population at no cost, is expensive. It costs our program about $2,000 for an 8-week program. So, that's just to offer the program at no cost. So you can imagine the expenses of everything involved, especially, everything has increased in prices. And so, again, it's not easy, but you just have to find a way. You have to find creative solutions and go with your plan.
So tell us about exactly I believe you have like several buckets of sessions and directed for particular people, and then how you work with the horses.
Well, it really depends on the person and their trauma. Each person has to be approached from a different aspect, and the clinicians, they build their own treatment plan. So, one treatment plan for one person might include what's called equine assisted EMDR. So EMDR is eye movement. No, let's see if I can remember this right. Eye movement. Never mind. EMDR. Okay. So EMDR is a evidence-based protocol for people with acute traumas. So, if you see something and you just can't get it out of your head, EMDR is a modality that's very effective to help the brain process that memory into long term. So it's not, keeping you awake at night or hypervigilant. And so one person might be getting the equine assisted EMDR, and another person might be just doing the regular, what we call equine assisted psychotherapy. So it does have its own platform and format, but it's also very loose within that format, again, depending on what that person might need. We do body work as well, because trauma affects the body, the nerves, the muscles, down to the cellular level. And so in Basehor, Kansas, we have our therapeutic and business center, and that's where we do our office-based body therapies. So it's a combination of corrective massage and pulse electromagnetic field therapy through a device that's been used for decades, and it has a lot of white papers and peer-reviewed articles about its effectiveness. But it reduces pain, inflammation, it optimizes circulation, and really just brings a better sense of well-being to the person by creative negative ions within the body. And so it helps just reduce a lot of the inflammation that causes systemic disease.
So how do we get the horses in there then? Are we riding the horses? What are we doing with your horses?
Well, the horses are not in Basehor, Kansas. We just bought property in Leavenworth, and so they're there. And it's ground-based, so we don't have the clients ride the horses. At some point, we might add a mounted piece, but with the populations that we serve, just sometimes with the level of trauma that they've been exposed to, if they're having a disassociative episode, we don't want them on top of a 2,000-pound animal. And so all of the programs that we do right now are all ground-based. So that means that you're not riding the horse. Mm-hmm. Horses are ideal for this type of work. They're a prey animal, so they're hardwired for survival, and they're very in tune with their environment. And it's all through nonverbal communication. And so through the 8-week process, like I said, we do have a model that we follow, but it's loose because people respond and interpret things differently. But the gist of it is the horses do act uniquely to each person. So we could have one person come out, and then an hour later, the horses will be completely different and doing different behaviors with the next person. And so we find that very relevant. And we watch for repeating patterns and shifts in what they're doing. And really, it's just a function of having the person identify the goals that they want to work on. And then we're observing the horses' behaviors during their session. And we're asking a question about, what are the horses doing over there? Or, what's coming up for you now? I mean, because the horses do elicit some deep emotional responses, and our nervous system responds to the horses as well. And through their interpretations and their answers, it brings really fast breakthroughs of what it is that is at the core of what's going on with them. So, and why they're there. So it's hard to explain in words. People look at me funny. They're like, do you pet them? Do you brush them? I'm like, well, yes and no. Uh-huh. It goes much deeper than that. Like I mentioned, there's some physiological benefits that happen that go kind of deep scientific stuff that I don't want to necessarily get into now. But when you're with a horse, we've seen grown, tough men convinced that they're not going to get anything out of their session. And by the end of the session, they're weeping and they've connected with the horse. And we don't know how to explain that.
How do you get your, I don't know whether to call them clients or patients or customers? How do
clients? Yeah. Well, they find us usually through our website. We get a lot of clients through our website, word of mouth. We do a lot of work in the community. So peer support groups in the different departments, whether it be police or fire, they're coming out for their leadership trainings. And so they're being exposed to the benefits of equine therapy. We work twice monthly with the Whole Health at the local VA in Kansas City, Missouri. And so, it's just, again, a function of people are starting to understand and get that this modality works. It's confidential. It's not going back in their record. It's not going to affect their career. Mm-hmm. It's no cost. And, they're not being put on any medications that might be addictive. And so I think a combination of those attributes are starting to make it more popular. We do have a waiting list right now, actually. We're kind of waiting for some of the rain to stop before we can start full force. But we don't have to convince anybody to come. They're knocking on our door right now.
But you said funding is challenging. So how are you trying to meet that challenge and keep the service free for people, as you say, really are in need?
We are supported through a couple of grants, one through the association. So the VA Adaptive Sports Grant, they fund a certain number of clients every year. They've reduced that number, though, this year, unfortunately. So, our need is rising and that fund is diminishing. And so we've been having to do more grant writing, more reaching out to different corporations and be like, you're a good corporation, you're local, why don't you help us out and, help some of our families that are really struggling. And families everywhere are struggling. It's not just limited to military first responder, populations. We get calls from people who aren't associated with that. We do have a for-profit that we service those clients under. But yes, funding is always a challenge. And so we're always looking for different fundraising avenues that don't cost us a lot of money. And like I said, more corporate support, private foundations. So yeah, one of our frequent asks is for funding for services, for sure.
Well, where's the best place for people to find out more information or even perhaps to donate to what you're trying to do?
Probably the best way to find out information is our website, which is www.horsesandheroes.org. It's all spelled out. We have a donation platform there. We have a Venmo platform as well. I'd have to send you the QR code or that link. I don't know it off the top of my head, but
sending folks to your website is perfect because I'm sure all the details are there. How many horses do you have and how many people on the team? So teammates that are horses, I guess, and teammates that are humans.
Yes. So we have 8 large 4-legged team members. All but 2 were rescued either through the kill pen pipeline or we have 2 that were former athletes and one was injured, one developed arthritis and couldn't perform. And so instead of destroying those animals, they decided to give them a second chance and a different job. And that's key too for our population, who are unfortunately, if they're medically retired or were injured on the job and they can't perform anymore, the ability for them to connect with these particular horses is really important for them to see that, there is hope and there is maybe a different job for me. We have 5 miniature horses and they don't know they're miniatures and they beat up on everybody. Well, I say beat up, but they, I could tell you a whole story on that, but I won't. It's just, it's funny to watch them interact with the big horses. We have 2 staff members that are paid, and we have 4 or 5 clinicians that work with us contractually. And we have 4 equine specialists that work with us and probably a half dozen volunteers.
Can you use more volunteers?
We could always use more volunteers. Yeah. Since we just moved to the Leavenworth County area, some of our volunteers were driving up from like Stillwell when we were in Shawnee. And so they're like, oh, that's just too far for me. So yeah, we are in the midst of doing a volunteer drive of having some new volunteers more in our general area interested in helping. And we have volunteer positions for being on the board, helping with the horses. If you like to mow, we have lots of mowing and groundskeeping and data entry. There's always jobs to do for a nonprofit.
Well, it's very exciting that you continue to grow this out of your own passion and kind of your own story to create something that's having this ripple effect. And just what a wonderful thing to provide for a particular set through the nonprofit. And then that you have this profit arm. So it's Horses and Heroes. Julie Baker is founder, executive director, I would imagine walking horse person and a few other jobs, as all nonprofit leaders seem to have to do. So we thank you so much for sharing your story and how you're moving things forward.
Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, which is also a nonprofit. This KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares, please check out our website at kccaresonline.org and spread the love and find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us on KC Cares.